Oi. When I was a small kid, I used to love writing. A lot. Especially when I was around the 3rd to 5th grade. Writing stories was probably my all-time favorite thing to do that wasn't either playing video games or watching PBS Kids in the living room. I remember a time where I wrote stories for my classroom in 3rd grade, usually cat-centric because, well, I was obsessed with cats. Unfortunately, I'm sure I lost all of them in a trash bin somewhere, which sucks. On top of that, maybe bits and pieces of them have been scattered all around the planet and burned and crushed into an unrecognizable mess. So good luck to me on getting those back. Same thing can be said with my 4th grade comic books. I wrote them with a friend of mine at the time, essentially making ourselves the class entertainers. Our business was popping. We were making a new comic for the class every week, and the other kids loved them. Every single one was as much of a banger as the last. Though I do remember this one situation where in one of the comics we made, Minecraft Steve was calling a creeper stupid. A teacher came up to me to check in our progress of the comic, and she looked at me and said, "Well, that's not very nice to him, now is it?" I remember being so embarrassed about it that the comic was ultimately canned. I was so innocent back in the day, something I will never get back since I am 17 years old now. God. But what I did manage to archive from my elementary school years is a box of notebooks full of the stories I would write at home. Huzzah! Granted, I never really finished the vast majority of them, but they were fun to write in whenever I wanted to do so. Just know that from elementary school on forward, I made it my responsibility to keep a backlog of every single thing in there, by having it sit in the corner of my room and making sure it never moves an inch. Easy enough. And today, I decided to take a look back and see what was going on in my mind back in ye olden days. And look what I found stored deep in my archives. A set of 3 notebooks. My most ambitious childhood endeavor. What could be inside of them? Let's find out. A thing that is made clear right away is in the very first bit of text on the inside cover. This is a Minecraft fanfiction called The Creeper Apocalypse. Or, wait. Sorry. Apocalypse. Note that this story was being written sometime between late 2014 and early 2015. For reference, Alex was someone that was just introduced to the game back in the 1.8 update during this year. Gangnam Style was still the most popular YouTube video on the planet with roughly 2.1 billion views. The first Five Nights at Freddy's game was released, and the second one was not so far behind. Windows 10 wasn't released yet. I know that it is weird that I'm saying this as a Linux user. The Nintendo Switch wouldn't be released for another 3 years, and most importantly, I was a 9-year-old kid with a mind full of ideas. Skimming through the fanfiction reveals that there are actually 337 pages in the story, which is actually quite insane for someone at this age. I doubt most of you can even imagine of writing that much about one childhood idea. And it seems that I was planning to go even further into the story until precisely page 518, but I guess it didn't turn out to be that long. Even if 337 pages was super ambitious for a kid, there was definitely enough steam for me to get that far. I had a lot of fun when I first wrote this, which is why today I am finally going to take a trip down memory lane and tell you what I have about the Minecraft story I wrote when I was 9 years old. The story follows a trio of 3 very recognizable Minecraft characters. Of course, we have Steve, and then we have Alex, and lastly, Normone Kraz. As you can tell, Normone was basically an OC I made specifically for this story because I wanted to follow some kind of rule of 3 or something like that. In my opinion, I think this name looks a little bit wacky with the use of seemingly out-of-place vowels and consonants, so from now on I will be referring to him as Norman Cross. I did have some character traits for each of the 3. Put simply, Steve was uber adventurous and liked exploring, Alex was playful and loved having friendly relations with people, and Norman had the brains and liked having authority over people. The first few sentences give some details that we should know about Steve. One of the most important things that my old self wanted us to know is that he was able to traverse through different worlds, including one called Frembria, which was a reference to another story I've written before, but of course I lost that one too. I even gave a name for the world this story takes place in as well, which I've given a less hard to pronounce name, Stermonia. We're also told that Steve and Norman have built a house together and now call it home. Now, enough introduction. Here is where our story begins. At this present moment, Steve is with Norman and is having lunch with him. They seem awfully bored, just having a grand old time, sitting at a table, with tiny mushroom stew in their hands, doing nothing. This was until someone came in through the door. It was a guest. It was none other than Alex, paying a visit to the house. Apparently, Steve was just in the other world I mentioned previously, which Alex also just so happened to be in. She had followed him into Stumonia to hang out with Steve some more. The three agreed to all have a meetup with the buddies for the rest of the day. The first order of business is to vanquish that boredom that had been looming over Steve and Norman. Alex suggests that they should build something, but no prompts came to mind. They brainstormed for a little bit and thought of some epic ideas. Perhaps they could build a roller coaster with a huge sculpture in the middle, perhaps of a minecart with a hollow inside, otherwise known as just a box. Perhaps maybe, A new guest arrives at the door. Who could it be? Alex recognizes who it was and shouts, "You again!" It was a creeper at the door. It had been following Alex right to their house. It was then that Norman had a realization. He proposes the idea that an apocalyptic event is happening. Alex immediately goes on board with this idea. So right off the bat, we are establishing a very credible source. Norman hatches a plan for what they should do first, and how they can stay alive during the event. As he is authoritarian, he has to make himself a good leader. He sets a bunch of guidelines for the group about what they can and can't do. Number 1, stay together and try not to get lost. Number 2, avoid enemies at all costs, because they can ally with creepers. Number 3, do not resort to violence, as that only agitates enemies more. Well, unless it's an absolute necessity. Number 4, don't give up, because victory is just beyond the horizon. Sounds good enough for me. The trio prepare themselves for the tasks ahead, and Norman makes explicitly clear that they should follow the rules. Many times. But that's okay though. He actually only does that just to make sure that Steve and Alex are safe, as if their memories are bad. Since there is still that creeper waiting at the door at this point, they make an escape plan through the window, and off they went to start their quest. End of chapter 1. To be honest, I do want to address a few things. Something that sticks out to me is how Norman knows all of what is imminent. It does not seem to be revealed how he knows in any of the 16 pages I made for chapter 1. Maybe he is a psychic or something. A second thing I want to mention is how the conflict is told to us within the first chapter. Here is some of the original text I wrote in 2014. I think it has just started. Norman looked very serious. Steve stared. What started, Norman? Steve was convinced. The creeper apocalypse, that's what started. That's when a lot of creepers get together in groups and fight the humans. They're also sending certain troops to the Nether, Norman explained. Generally, it's not a good idea to do this, because it breaks an unspoken rule. Show, don't tell. By telling your audience that something is amuck in your world, this kills any potential suspense, as they might as well know exactly how it's going to end up in the future. Perhaps instead, I could have exposed the trio to different situations that are abnormal to how it would normally go down, which would lead them to the conclusion that there is indeed something wrong. Another thing I noticed is a single creeper at the door signaled Norman to make such a bold claim about how the world is in danger, and it is their job to do something about it. In an attempt to make him seem like a know-it-all, I accidentally made him look like a big tinfoil hat on head conspiracy theorist. Watch out, but could he be correct in his claims of global domination? Let's find out in Chapter 2. The trio are escaping from their house further into the plains when nightfall strikes upon them. Norman notices that creepers have become more active and spawn more often. He begins to make another banger claim. They also become more explosive in the night, so you'd best be staying away. Okay. The trio walk up to the side of the hill, and they hear something. It sounds like talking? Norman decides to take a peek over the hill, and what he saw was nothing short of shocking. It was a troop of creepers, a large one with a shiny yellow crown on his head, commanding 4 regularly sized ones to come after the trio in specific. It could be implied that this trio is the reason why the world exists to begin with, which kind of makes sense, but at the same time, does that really make these people gods? If so, that's blasphemy! More importantly though, it turns out that what Norman was saying, god damn, It might actually be true. Norman suggests that they go look for a sacred object called the Infinity Diamond, as it's the only thing that can entice a creeper of this size to relinquish power. This Infinity Diamond is located somewhere in the end. It's something that can be found after the dragon egg. But why? That's just what my brain thought, I guess. The trio carefully crawls away from the creeper troop and finds out how they should get to the end. Of course, if you know how the game works, you would need to go to the Nether to obtain blaze powder and maybe some ender pearls along the way. My 9-year-old self got the Nether part right, but not quite anything else. Steve is asked about what to do next. It is also explicitly told to us that they need to locate chests, which have straight up ender eyes in them. Not to mention that they were put in random places around nether fortresses like a scavenger hunt. Interesting. I think I was trying to find a way to comply with Norman's third rule here, but in doing such a thing, I bumped into fallacies in game mechanics. Whoops. Norman is impressed that Steve even remembers this fact, which is of course something originally told from Norman. Because of these words, he embarrasses Steve right in front of both him and Alex. Yikes! Eventually, the trio notices a village in the distance, but it seems empty. Too empty. It turns out that this is an abandoned village. It makes them wonder where the villagers went. And look who comes up again to explain what in the world happened to them. Steve does. He says that they all went into a villager house that was made out of obsidian and attached a rocket to the bottom of it. In conclusion, they just flew away. Alex gets the idea that maybe some of the obsidian was left behind, and they could go to the village to get them. Luckily, there does seem to be a blacksmith here, so it's not that bad of an idea. Speedrunners rely on them, and so shall they. They start heading down to the village, but there's a little bit of a problem. Since it was nighttime, they have to deal with monsters spawning, which will inevitably slow down our heroes. Remember the 4 creepers that Norman saw a little bit ago? Well, here they come. Their first of many encounters. Ah, so we meet. Finally. Prepare to surrender. Alex bravely declines this request. No, we will never surrender to the likes of you. You'll never ascend your ranks to become a prince. Right, so we have a king, and we allegedly have princes and princesses. That must mean that the Creeper Force is essentially a rebellious society under a monarchy. Norman tells Steve and Alex to run away. As the 3 run away, the creepers have a trick up their sleeves. They have splash speed potions that they have stolen from somewhere. They chase after the trio. Steve says that the only way to outrun them is to just keep running until the potion wears out. While it wasn't the greatest use of human energy, this ends up working. The creepers file a complaint to the king. One of the creepers explains what had just happened. The king is not deterred by this letdown, for he has a plan that is sure to work the next time they meet. The chapter ends there. As far as character development goes, this isn't as strong as a start as I would have hoped. I originally wanted Norman to be a helpful person to Steve and Alex. I gave it a fair shot, but I wish I could have done better with that. First off, it's quite easy to tell how much negative energy just emanates from this guy, unintentionally belittling Steve just by saying that he was surprised that he remembered something, making bold claims that just make him seem like some crazed lunatic, having a constant effort to ingrain the rules in people's heads. Good boss, huh? Though, I do not want to lose hope in Norman yet, as we are only chapter 2 into the story at the moment, and there are still plenty more left for him to redeem himself. Who knows? Maybe he will actually end up closer to my original vision for him. Also, as a side note, am I the only one who thinks that the fact that these creepers are talking is just adorable? Like, usually you just hear them make hissing sounds as it tries to blow you up, but here, that is just not the case. Not only do they have the ability to speak to the humans, they also do not explode when in close proximity to the humans. I will admit, this is coming from a biased perspective, but I never hated creepers like most Minecraft players did. In fact, when I was a kid, they were my favorite mob in the entire game, vanilla or otherwise. I also felt the same way for pea shooters in Plants vs. Zombies. Maybe I had some sort of connection to armless green things that made me find them cute. Anyways, why don't they explode? Isn't that what they were meant to do? It could be possible that they were mimicking the behaviors of a creeper back in the survival test phase of Minecraft, where they will only explode if they are killed. I used to be such a history nut when it came to Minecraft, So that's the theory I'm going to go with here. I think now would be a good time to move on from Chapter 2 and start reading the third one to see what happens next. Our heroes have finally made it to the village after that tiring chase, and notice that it is quite empty. Again. They realize for a second time that it is abandoned, despite explaining how it might have went down there a few minutes earlier. Norman says, well, it wouldn't be so abandoned if we managed to fix this whole mess. Hey, how come you know this much about this creeper thing anyway? Research! Wait a minute. You know what that means? Norman actually is credible after all. Steve thinks about where the nearest portal is until he finds that they are gonna have to build one themselves, perhaps forgetting why they were getting obsidian in the first place. Getting them from the blacksmith. The trio become focused on getting said obsidian. They would have gone into the blacksmith that is clearly drawn a few pages ago, but for whatever reason, they don't actually check on it. Silly geese you are, eh? Don't worry though, they have a better idea. They are going to use a water bucket on a lava pit somewhere and reap its rewards. They decide to look around, and eventually they discover a cavern. The thing is, it is the deepest one you could ever imagine. A water pit sat at the bottom of the cavern. Norman wants to jump in, and Alex calls him crazy for thinking of such an idea. After some convincing, they all jump in, and as expected, they land in the water. Alex has a fear of deep waters, and consequently, a lack of knowledge on how to swim, which doesn't help the situation for her. Instead of helping her, the other two marvel at what is above them. Oh wow, is that a mine shaft? Norman builds up a pillar and puts ladders on one of the poles. Once the trio waited for Alex to swim out of the water pit, all by herself, they go take a look around and see if there was anything useful for later. What they find next is probably some of the wackiest world generation you can possibly think of in Minecraft. They find this giant empty area with multiple floating mine shafts and even a dungeon somewhere in there. Is this even possible in the vanilla game? Probably not. You be the judge. Norman becomes terrified due to his fear of heights, and they figure, oh well, I guess there's nothing here, and they turn back. What a pleasant surprise, it is a creeper standing menacingly right behind them. Wait, hold on one sec. There are actually 4 of them. Sound familiar? Ha ha ha! We got you cornered again! Now do you surrender this time? Nah. Think about it. You're at a ledge and about to fall to your doom, so you might as well give up because we are going to give you a sizzle! Apparently that is supposed to be a pun, but to this day I still can't figure out what word I was trying to derive it from. The creeper pulls out his flint and steel and decides to commit arson on the mineshaft. Realizing what they have just done, the creepers make a run for it. The humans escaped as well. At this point, the creepers were already doing some parkour up the hole, which is quite the sight, because they only have their stubby little legs for doing such a task. Also taking into account how the humans weren't even able to do that, this makes the creepers very talented. Maybe they could have banded together on a parkour YouTube channel instead of working for some tyrant king. Of course, our human friends decide to place blocks all the way up to the top. You know, the boring way to do it. So once they get out of the hole, they see that the creepers have run off. Where have they gone? Meanwhile, the creepers file a complaint to the king. One of the creepers explains what had just happened. The king is not deterred by this letdown, for he has a plan that is sure to work the next time they meet. The chapter ends there. Well, I did notice one more thing when I was reading this chapter, as well as the previous. Now, is it just me, or does it seem like these creepers give up on what they were doing very easily? In Chapter 2, they did have the good idea of using stolen speed potions to catch up to the humans, maybe even outrun them and capture them. But once they run out of energy, it was aw shucks for them. Their actions in Chapter 3 are a better example. All they do to try to stop the humans is to light up a portion of the mine shaft and make a run for it. But the fact that they immediately retreated after this makes me think that these guys' work ethics are astoundingly low. So if the creepers want to capture the humans at some point, they really have to step up their game. They could make sure that there are more ways to approach the situation without giving up 5 seconds after something doesn't go to plan. Will they have a different mindset later on? We'll see. I also saw something similar with the humans. Notice how I never mentioned anything about having them mine anything while they were underground. They easily gave up looking in the cave to see if there was maybe a lava pool of some sort. Let's say, hiding behind one of the cave walls. They just became super fixated on getting the hell out of there once the mineshaft was on fire. With that attitude towards the task, it would become harder yet to find a lava pool. I mean, it's probably understandable because I might have acted the same way towards a task at the time I wrote this story. Fail one way to do a task might as well be impossible, right? Another thing that comes to my mind, according to earlier in this story, it says that the king is able to retrieve identifiable information about the humans without even coming into contact with them. What is stopping them from doing the same with a different species? The king has not taken notice of what little work ethic the four creepers have. Does it not retrieve things like their productivity or any non-identifiable attributes? Having one big data set of names you can't do anything with must really suck. So in the quest to find some obsidian for their nether portal, their first attempt was proven unsuccessful because some people will try to get in the way of others, and they are left to find another place to find lava. Will they ever make it to the nether? How would I know? I haven't gone that far yet.